Hello guys, welcome back to my channel and enjoy this fanfic part 1. Now let's start the fanfic. A shirtless Naruto was panting heavily as he continued his training, sweat glistening off his well-toned muscular frame, dripping from his forehead onto his chiseled chest. Before falling onto the ground, forming a small pool beneath him, as he mercilessly punched at the rock before him with his bloodied hands. Long gone was the usual trademark orange jumpsuit he used to wear, but now sported a pair of black Junin baggy pants much like ones worn by his old sensei Kakashi. The necklace that Tsunade had given him hung loosely from his neck, but discarded to the side was a Junin vest, and a black t-shirt. He had taken them off to cool down, so he would not have to halt his training, which at this point was nothing more than pounding away at a large boulder that shook with every hit and crumbled away into dust a little bit more with each blow. He felt no pain as his bloody fist smacked into the stone. The Jinchuriki-enhanced strength and healing properties of the young Junin was truly a marvel to behold. He said nothing as he hit the object before him, and cared not who might see him, training in the oppressive heat of the summer afternoon. Nothing mattered to Naruto anymore. Even when he had everything he thought he had wanted, he was miserable. He had found Sasuke. 5 years ago, they both had been 18 at the time. A fierce battle had ensued. They had been evenly matched for a time, but in the cataclysmic climax of the battle, he had finally defeated the Uchiha, withouting him, and dragged him back to the Leaf Village. Upon their return, he had been hailed as a hero. Everyone praised him and he was finally receiving the recognition he had sought his entire life. Even Sasuke had thanked him for bringing him back. After that, Naruto had joined the Anbu and quickly rose through the ranks to become a Junin captain. He had even recently been recommended by the village council, the same council that had been a plague to him for years growing up, as the successor to Tsunade to become the next Hokage. This should have made him happy. Everything he had strived so hard to achieve was finally coming to fruition, but it did not make him happy. All Naruto had felt for the last 3 years was emptiness that grew a little more every single day. Naruto winced as he struck the boulder again, as his mind drifted to the people who had brought this endless sense of nothingness upon him. Sakura was now engaged to Sasuke after 5 years of being together. Hinata had long since married Kiba 3 years ago. Ino was an Anbu, as was Shikamaru. They had been dating for the last 2 years. Everyone was prosperous, as was he. But, what was there for him anymore? What purpose did he have? To be Hokage. He felt no drive, no desire for that position any longer. Part of that dream he had told no one about was to be able to share that success with someone by his side to love and be loved. Unfortunately, Kami, fate, or whatever had deemed that not to be, so what was the point of being Hokage if you're all alone? He found no joy in this village anymore, but oddly enough, he bore it no ill will either. What had happened to him? What did he feel? He felt nothing. As he turned to pick up his shirt and necklace and put them on when he heard a voice softly say, "I'm sorry, Naruto. I'm sorry for everything." He froze for a moment before turning on his heel to face her, his cerulean blue eyes locked coldly onto her widened emerald eyes, and he asked, "What was that?" Taking in a deep breath, she was about to repeat herself, but he stopped her when he snapped, the hate eating at his heart and soul. You're sorry for what, Sakura? For all the pain you've given me my entire life. From hitting me, belittling me, and finally humiliating me over the years. Are you sorry for using me as a tool to return your precious Sasuke-kun back to you? Is that what you are sorry for?" Naruto's eyes were red and narrowed into slits as he fought desperately from letting his anger fuel the red chakra building within him from bursting forth. Or are you sorry because everyone in this village sees you for what you really are? A selfish, manipulative bitch, who will use whatever means she needs to get what she wants, and if she doesn't, throws a temper tantrum until she does. Sakura was at a loss for words, and managed to stammer out, "What's come over you?" Sakura pleadingly asked, the hurt of Naruto's words evident in her voice. Tentatively, she placed a hand on his shoulder, but he viciously slapped it off. Why are you so angry? Sakura asked in a worried murmur. Naruto laughed, but it was not the kind of laugh that was friendly. In fact, it was the furthest thing from friendly. This laugh it was harsh and filled with anger, malice and rage. When he opened his eyes, they were as cold and unfriendly as ice, as he now spat at her with spite. I can't believe you have the audacity to ask me that question. When you above all others should know why I'm angry. I'm sorry, Sakura. I suppose you were expecting me to accept your apology with a smile on my face and jump up and down and follow you all over the place like a little puppy dog, just like I did when we were kids. Am I right? A chill went through Sakura's body at the sound of the venom dripping from Naruto's voice, and his glare broke her heart. Sakura had missed the way Naruto used to look at her. The way he would speak softly to her when she was sad, lonely, or needed support. That Naruto was gone, and the cold, brutal one standing before her now she herself had helped to create by her own hands. As he continued on. Well, let me tell you, I don't want anything to do with you. I'm not your little bitch anymore, Haruno. Nothing you could say to me would ever make me change my mind. I brought your Sasuke-kun back to you. What did you think, that you can just waltz in and say sorry and everything will go back to the way it was? Naruto snorted with derision, not waiting for an answer, and in a voice that was literally dripping with sarcasm said, Sweetheart, I am not falling for it. I was a fool once for you, but never again, never freaking again. I will not become the Jiraiya to your Tsunade for the rest of my life. Sakura fought desperately to hold back the tears that were trying to well in her eyes. What could she say? What could she do? Why didn't she realize after her encounter with him last month that he bore a deep hatred and anger towards her, and had for a long time? Flashback 1 month. As Naruto stumbled out of the bar with an opened bottle of sake in his hand, it was late and he was drunk, very drunk. Naruto had tried to convince himself that the reason he was hammered was because he was celebrating. Alone, of course. His celebration being the fact that on his last mission he had broken Hatake Tsukumo, the legendary White Fang, and his former sensei's father's record for most in Anbu history. Such a feat had garnered him much praise throughout the village, so why not celebrate the achievement? However, deep down Naruto knew the only reason he got drunk, which was getting more frequent, was to drive back the memories of 3 people over the last 3 years. When Naruto staggered over to a lamppost and leaned against it to steady himself to take another drink, a friendly voice called out, Hey Dobi. Looking over through half-lidded eyes, Naruto spied his 2 former teammates, and any merriment he had been feeling quickly disappeared, as he coldly replied before taking another swig of the bottle. Sakura. Both Sasuke and Sakura shot pensive looks at one another before they approached Naruto, and Sasuke said, Hey Naruto, we've been looking everywhere for you. We heard you got back from your latest mission and wanted to find you before you left on another one. You've been doing so many missions these past 3 years, we've hardly ever see you anymore. Well, now you've found me, what do you want? Naruto replied in a bored tone of voice. Sakura and I have some exciting news and we wanted you to be the first to know. Go on, Sakura, why don't you tell him? I don't know, Sasuke, maybe we should wait until Naruto's feeling better. I feel the same way, I always do, Sakura, so go ahead and tell me this exciting news. Naruto commented in a monotone sounding voice before taking another drink. Naruto, well, Sasuke and I wanted to announce that we are going to be getting married soon and. Sakura stammered. And we want you to be the best man. Kami, Sakura, it's not that hard to say. Sasuke stated with annoyance at his fiance's stammering, as he finished her sentence. Anger and jealousy burned at Naruto's soul, and he clenched his fist until his knuckles turned white, but forced a smile for Sakura and Sasuke and firmly said, Congratulations. Naruto then brought the bottle up to his mouth and took another large swig of the burning liquor. Is that all you have to say, Dobi? Sasuke queried. What more do you want, Em? I want you to be my best man. Sorry, I don't think I can do that. Why not? Because I'm busy these days, you yourself said it. I have a lot of missions that need to be accomplished over the next few months. I've been given a lot of responsibility in the Anbu and I have no way of attending the wedding. Our wedding is going to be next month, Naruto. You can't take one day off for that, for me and Sakura. I can't, Sasuke. My responsibilities concern the safety of the Leaf Village, so I can't. That's bullshit and you know it. That was the straw that broke Naruto's proverbial back, as he had been keeping in all the anger, envy, and resentment he had felt for a long time for his former teammates. Seething with rage, he glared at the engaged couple and angrily declared, "You know what's bullshit? It's bullshit that after everything I've given to you, literally, that you two have the nerve to ask me that, and then when I say I can't, you try and guilt me into doing it. You know what? I may or may not have a mission next month, but whether I do or not, I can tell you one thing: I won't be attending your wedding. After everything you've given me, what the hell are you talking about, Dobi?" Sasuke shouted with angered confusion. Naruto shot a quick look at Sakura, who had remained silent with her head bowed down, and then it hit Naruto like a ton of bricks, who suddenly realized and said with low mocking laughter at her, "Ha, ha, ha, he doesn't know, does he? After all this time and he still doesn't know. Ha, 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 ha." Naruto then turned around and walked away, his maniacal laughter growing in intensity as he left his teammates standing in the street. End of flashback. Taking a deep breath, Sakura nodded and did her best to mask the pain she was feeling inside before softly saying, "I understand, I won't bother you ever again, Naruto. I just wanted you to know that I'm truly sorry for all the pain I've caused you and deeply regret my past actions towards you. I never meant to hurt you, but I did, and I'm sorry, and there's nothing more that I can say other than that." Turning away from the young man, she held her head up high as she walked off of the training field and towards the Hokage's office to report in from her mission. After that, when she was alone in her apartment, then she could cry. For little did Naruto know that she had broken off her engagement with Sasuke, as both of them had decided to go their separate ways. Naruto watched her go, and when she was gone, he angrily swung around and with a chakra-enhanced fist punched a tree that seemed to explode on contact, as wooden chunks of shrapnel fell about the training grounds like rain falling from the sky. "Damn it!" His rage-filled scream echoed in the air, before he slumped down to the ground. Naruto mentally cursed at himself for melting to her words, and then attacking her with his. A large part of him felt that she deserved it, but his heart cried in agony. It was not just her, but she was a part of it. Where had he gone wrong? Why wasn't he deserving of some happiness? Somewhere along the way, he had lost himself, and he knew not how to replace what he had lost. Love, joy, happiness. Naruto now realized he would not find any of that here. All he found here was nothing but pain. So what purpose did he have any more in his life? Naruto looked down at his Junin vest still lying on the ground for a moment before kicking it away. This place was too much for him. She along with the other two had been too much for him. Everything in this village was just too much and he was going insane as a result. He had to leave. It was late into the night and no one was awake. So, there was not a soul present to see one blond young man with a pack strapped to his back walking calmly towards the gates of the village. Or so he thought. In a swirl of leaves, Sasuke appeared before him, clad in Junin attire with arms crossed over his chest. His black obsidian orbs fell on the backpack Naruto had shouldered, and he frowned, as he put two and two together. Naruto was leaving. Naruto's cold cerulean blue eyes met his and he said nothing. He took a step forward, but Sasuke was in front of him in an instant, barring his path with his arms out to block him, as he asked, "Naruto, what's wrong?" There was genuine concern resonating in Sasuke's voice, as he remembered going down a similar path years ago. A dark path Naruto had saved him from and had shown him the light. He owed his friend that much, to steer him away from this path. Naruto's eyes narrowed as he was stopped, and a second later, there was a kunai pressed against Sasuke's throat, held by him as said demanded with seriousness. "Move, Sasuke, don't make me you." Sasuke shook his head, ignoring the small trickle of blood it drew, as the blade nicked his throat. No, this isn't the Naruto I know. You saved me from this dark path and I won't let you now go down the same path. A dry and bitter laughter filled the air, as Naruto shook his head before saying, Sasuke, you just don't get it, do you? He leaned in now, and whispered into the ear of his best friend. The Naruto you knew is dead, he died 3 years ago. Sasuke frowned at this as Naruto pulled back and he angrily shouted at his friend. Baka, I refuse to believe that. You're still the same loser, the same teammate, the same best friend. Naruto scowled at him now, and the Uchiha knew a different tactic was in order and exclaimed. Sakura broke off the engagement. She wants to be with you. I told her to listen to her heart. Naruto paused for a moment before he lowered the kunai, and Sasuke saw a grave sadness in the eyes of his friend. I'm sorry, but it doesn't matter anymore, Sasuke. I can't stay here, it hurts too much. I won't betray the village that I swear to you, but neither can I stay here any longer. What's been taken from me, I can never get back if I stay here. In a flash, he was behind Sasuke and the Uchiha heard Naruto quietly say. Thank you for being my friend. Sasuke then felt everything go dark from a quick chop to his neck. As his friend collapsed to the ground, Naruto turned around to continue his journey and in one monumental leap, soared over the village gates and into the night. His life was uncertain except for one thing. Naruto Uzumaki had left the Leaf Village. Naruto silently walked along the dirt road not caring where he went, but just content to keep walking. 3 days ago, he had just committed an act of treason. He had deserted the village hidden in the leaves and KO'd Sasuke in the process, who had desperately attempted to stop him. However, nothing and no one could have stopped him that night. Naruto felt if he had spent just one more day in the village, it would drive him to madness. And once he had left, it felt good to have the wind in his hair and fresh air in his lungs, as he let out a comfortable sigh. Naruto felt just a bit happier now that he was out of the village and commented to himself. I hope they can understand why I left. Then it hit him, like a chakra-enhanced punch from Tsunade. They wouldn't understand why he left. All they would be concerned with was the fact that he had left. The stark realization finally sunk into Naruto that he was a missing nin now. What's more, he was a Junin captain of his former village, so they would never stop looking for him. He would be hunted down and be dragged back to the village, or outright to preserve the secrets he knew of Konoha from being revealed, as Naruto thought to himself. Perhaps this was what Sasuke had lived with, when he left the village, all those years ago. Was it this bad, this feeling of always having to look over your shoulder? Naruto didn't like this feeling, not one bit. The thought of fighting his friends was not a pleasant one to him, and it made him frown for the first time since he left at the thought of having to see the life fade from their eyes, to have their blood on his hands. He quickened his pace a bit, as worry clouded his features before he exclaimed. I have to get out of here and fast, but where to go? He needed to find a place to stay for a little while to elude the tracker ninja that would undoubtedly be sent his way soon. Naruto knew his initial deterrent to stop them had been only temporary measure at the time of his departure. Konoha would never give up hunting for him, that much was for certain, as he stopped walking and contemplated with himself. But where should I go? I can't take up refuge in Suna, at least not yet. That would put Gaara in a bad spot politically. Still, I have to think of somewhere to go. I can't just walk around aimlessly. Then it hit him and he knew exactly where he could go, even if it were just for a brief amount of time he would be safe there. Flashback 3 days. Tsunade felt tears start to well in her hazel-colored eyes, as a bedraggled Sasuke walked into her office and gave her the heartbreaking news. I'm sorry, Hokage-sama, it's no use. When Naruto left the village, he created a few hundred clones and sent them off in various directions. The Inuzuka trackers can't tell which trail is the true scent of the real Naruto. The Dobi could be anywhere by now. Instantly, The Uchiha received an accusing glare from the Godime Hokage, not liking Sasuke's insulting nickname for Naruto, as she spat with condemnation. Never call him that in front of me again, Uchiha, and I want to know, did you have anything to do with Naruto leaving? No, Hokage-sama. In fact, I tried to stop him, which is why I look the way I do. Alright, I want the whole story. How did Naruto respond when you tried to stop him? Sasuke sighed as he ran his left hand over his face, not sure if he should mention this next part, but knew he couldn't refuse his Hokage and begrudgingly answered. At first, he threatened to me, and then when I told him that Sakura and I had broken off our engagement, he said that it didn't matter because the old Naruto died 3 years ago. He promised on our friendship that he wouldn't turn on or betray the village, but he said he just couldn't stay here anymore. He mentioned something about what's been taken from him he can never get back if he stayed here. Tsunade buried her head in palms of her hands, as the buxom blonde Hokage wasn't 100% certain, but she had a pretty good idea what Naruto was referring to, and the guilt of her role in that affair overcame her and she began to weep. After a few minutes, she inhaled a deep breath, raised up her head up from her palms, and when she did, her expression was unreadable. He may be a friend to us all, but we can't let him leave the village like he did. As long as he has the Kyuubi sealed within him, he is a dangerous threat to our village. Not to mention all the secrets of the village he possesses as well. Because of all of that, I'm going to have to list him as an A- ranked missing nin. Sasuke was stunned beyond words upon realizing with horror what that meant for his friend and surrogate brother, as he shouted with disbelief. You want him dead? Tsunade said nothing as Sasuke glared at her, while the Uchiha's mind drifted to the memory of his fight with Naruto 5 years ago. When the blonde shinobi had Light Rally beat the hell out of Sasuke, and just when Naruto was about to deliver the final blow and end Sasuke's life as he should have, he relented. The memory of that day was forever ingrained into Sasuke's mind. Memory flashback 5 years. A battered and bloody Naruto stood over an equally beaten Sasuke. His hand held a red Rasengan, and it was poised ready to deliver the final blow to the downed Uchiha, who lay motionless from the wounds Naruto had inflicted. So immense was Naruto's power that he had used only 6 of the 9 tails of the great and powerful Kyuubi no Yuko. Sasuke coughed up some blood, and glared at his rival before spitting. Finish it, you stupid dobi, put me out of URK. Sasuke gasped in pain, as Naruto's free hand suddenly lashed out and grabbed him by his collar, hoisting the Uchiha into the air, leaving his feet dangling off the ground in midair as he was held there by his foe. Just like Sasuke had done to him in the Valley of the End. No, was the lone word Naruto spoke, as he lowered his chakra-covered hand, extinguishing the red Rasengan he held within it, releasing the red energy, as his eyes faded to their cerulean blue color before the blonde shinobi shouted with determination. You're coming back to the village, Tem, whether you want or not. End of memory flashback. Sasuke smiled nostalgically at that memory. He fought like a demon that night, and yet he spared me. Then the reality of what the Hokage had just done reemerged and rage overtook him, as he shouted with fury. After all he has done for this village, all he has done for ME, all he has done for YOU, and you want him dead? What kind of Hokage are you? The 5th Hokage knew exactly how he felt, she would no tolerate insubordination. Slamming her hands down on her desk with an audible, ear-splitting crack, she scowled at the angry Uchiha before firing back in response. Fool, I said A ranked not S ranked, which is an automatic on-site order. And damn it, I don't have a choice, but to list him as a missing nin. The civilian council led by Danzo and those 2 old crones of my sensei's teammates are just looking for a reason to force me to step down as Hokage. So if it looked like I was showing favoritism by not issuing that rank on missing shinobi of Naruto's caliber because of who he is, that would just be the ammunition they need to oust me. What a brave Hokage you are. Sasuke snorted sarcastically. Listen, you little brat, there is no other way. Looking at the picture of him and Jiraiya on her desk, Tsunade exhaled a sad sigh for her now dead teammate. In the picture, he and a younger, more cheerful Naruto were both smiling brightly, eyes closed and flashing the peace sign to the camera. The image of Naruto and Jiraiya having calmed her down, Tsunade looked up and said in a somber tone of voice. The Akatsuki were never finished off Sasuke. Naruto may be above Sannin or even a Kage level now, but so was Jiraiya back then, and we all know what happened to him. Sasuke hung his head in sad remembrance, the memory of Naruto weeping over the pervert's grave, it was still painfully fresh in his mind. The Sannin had been like a father to the hyperactive blonde much of his life, and now he too was dead. Another of his precious people forcefully ripped away from him. Tsunade's next words made him feel like screaming, as he was helpless like a child in this situation. Uchiha Madara and the other Akatsuki are still out there. We cannot allow them to get a hold of the Kyuubi, for if they do, it will be the end of us all. I can't, no, I won't let him bleed. I have to get him to come back. Sasuke silently mused before asking. Hokage-sama, give me 2 weeks. I'll try everything within my power to bring him back. Tsunade was more than happy to give him that time. Permission granted. But make it fast, Sasuke, and if he won't come back, then you know what you have to do. As it is right now, I have to send out at least one Anbu team to try and find him to placate and appease the council. I don't know if that's wise, Lady Tsunade. If pushed too far, then Naruto may just the Anbu squad if they find him before I do. Perhaps, this is why I'm going to send the Anbu team ISC. It's still a risk given Naruto's past relationship with one of them. I know, but I'm counting on that past relationship to keep Naruto in check if they do find him before you do. This is why you need to find him first, Sasuke. Hi, Lady Tsunade. Sasuke quickly replied before vanishing in a swirl of leaves. Only then, when she was certain that she was alone, did Tsunade burst out into tears, anguished at what she had just ordered, the sobs racking her body as she let the water flow freely. What an age they lived in when the young were forced to die before they ever got a chance to grow old, as she stammered. Naruto. I'm so sorry. However, unbeknownst to Tsunade, a young woman with lavender-colored eyes had come by to drop off the daily hospital reports on the patients currently treated and had heard the entire conversation between the blonde Hokage and Sasuke. With tears streaming down her face to match Tsunade's, Hinata Inuzuka ran out of the waiting room outside the Hokage's office. The former Hyuga heiress had just made a decision, and soon Naruto would not be only Leaf Shinobi listed as a missing nin before the day was through. End of flashback. Naruto felt a smile tug at his lips, as he stepped off the bridge and inhaled the deep sea salt air of the ocean. And when he looked around the island, his eyes widened a bit, as he saw that over the past few years the wave country had prospered into a respectable community that was bustling with life. Naruto turned around to look back at the mainland, and when he did, he spied the sign that was hung just over the bridge. Upon closer inspection of it, he felt tears of pride begin to well in his eyes. They named it after me, I'll be damned. Naruto thought to himself as he read the sign. The Great Naruto Bridge. Built in honor of the hero who helped free us from oppression and gave us our courage, our faith, and our lives back to us. He will always be welcomed here, for as long as he wishes to grace us with his noble presence. Then he calmly walked off the bridge, making his way to the one place he needed to go. Tazuna nearly fell out of his easy chair, as a now teenage Inari burst through the door, slamming it against the wall and nearly giving the aged man a heart attack from the ruckus his grandson had created. Inari now had his crossbow strapped to his back, as he was clad in a white muscle shirt, and gray torn and faded jeans. His face was alight with glee and excitement, and he was impatiently tapping his foot on the wooden floor, as Tazuna recovered himself. Grandpa. Grandpa. Guess what? Tazuna groaned as he put a hand over his chest, his heart now beating like a drum. What's so important that you nearly gave me a heart attack? Damn it, Inari, why do you have to scare me like that? Tazuna was too old to be spooked by most things anymore. However, much to his aggravation, his grandson still managed to scare the living daylights out of him on a daily basis without fail. And this time was no exception, as Inari paid him no heed to his complaints, for he was visibly jumping up and down with excitement. It's Naruto. He's come back. That nearly gave the aging bridge builder another heart attack, as his eyes bugged out of his head and he exclaimed. What? He came back, ye say? Tazuna was out of his chair in an instant and his sandals met his feet a moment later, as he stood in front of his enthusiastic grandson, his own face now alight with happiness. That's wonderful news. Where is he? Inari now grabbed the hand of his grandfather, and roughly dragged him outside. Come on. I'll take you to him. Naruto let out a sigh as he looked down upon the graves of both Momochi Zabuza and his protege Haku, the massive sword of the Demon of the Mist, now strapped to his back. It felt wrong to take the blade, it made him feel like a grave robber, but he needed it for protection, and the sight of the Great Beheader would give any opponent some pause before they attacked. Forgive me, Zabuza, but I will need this and I will do your name proud with it. As Naruto turned around, a wind blow past him from behind and he could have sworn he heard a whispered voice say, Take it. That was all the confirmation he needed, and grasping the hilt from its place on his back, he felt the presence of Zabuza, the man even through death who had led Naruto to form his own Nindo so long ago. This blade would serve him well, much like it had its former master. Naruto would honor the finely carved steel, and take good care of it. Naruto exhaled a sigh. If he was to be hunted, then he had found the means to defend himself. He would stay in the wave for a short time until he could map out his next move. However, the blonde shinobi mused that he needed a disguise of sorts, as he thought. I wonder if there's a mask maker around these parts. Naruto Nissen. Looking over his shoulder, Naruto felt a rare grin grow on his face, from ear to ear when he saw Inari and Tazuna racing towards him, whilst the elderly man was being pulled along by his grandson. It was an amusing sight as the aging man was visibly out of breath, as his grandson released him to race towards Naruto, who looked and was genuinely happy to see them again. Hey, old man, Inari. Naruto turned to face them fully and greeted them warmly, truly happy to see that they were alive and well. A moment later, Naruto was nearly tackled to the ground, as Inari grabbed the taller man in a big bear hug, overjoyed to see his friend after so long a time. You came back. This is so cool. Naruto chuckled as he got an arm loose, and gave Inari the noogie of his life, causing him to release his friend for the bone-crushing grip. Yow. Take it easy. You'll burn my scalp off. Tazuna laughed as he watched the two goofing around. Simmer down, Inari. Let Naruto breathe. Naruto laughed as he was released, then noticed the crossbow strapped to the teen's back. Looks like you've been practicing with that thing. Inara beamed up at his lifelong friend, and gave him thumbs up. I sure have. I can hit coin 50 yards every single time. Inari proudly boasted, before the young boy noticed the massive sword strapped to the back of the ex-Leaf Junin, as well as the scratched leaf headband he wore now shifted to the side much like Zabuza's had been. Naruto Nissen, why do you have Zabuza's sword? Tazuna's smile collapsed into a frown, as he watched Naruto's face fall a bit as the blonde shinobi tried to explain. Well, Inari, you see. However, Tazuna interrupted him and said, Inari, why don't you go let the townsfolk know that the hero of the wave has returned to visit us? That's a great idea, Grandpa. Everyone will love seeing Naruto Nissen again. Inari exclaimed before racing off. Tazuna then turned to Naruto and with a grim look on his face asked. You left the Leaf Village, didn't you? Naruto sadly nodded his head in confirmation. I can't hide anything from you, can I, old man? Tazuna shook his head as he moved his aching legs forward, and placed a hand on the shoulder of Naruto. You sure can't. I'm still alive for a reason. So, do you want to tell me why you left? Not right now, maybe later if that's alright with you. Tazuna nodded in understanding, but then his face lit up again, as he slapped the blonde on the back jovially and said. That's fine, but enough of that, let's go back to my place and have a welcome back party and you are the guest of honor. Naruto felt like his old self, as he sheepishly scratched the back of his head. Yeah, I'd like that. Tazuna laughed, and slapped him on the back again. Ah, it really is good to have the hero of the wave here with us again. The bridge builder now gave him a thumbs up of his own, then did an about face, and began to lead the way down the hill, strutting proudly when he saw a crowd of people with Inari at the front had assembled at the bottom of the hill. Turning his head around, he shouted back to Naruto, who was lagging behind. Well, come on then, your adoring fans are waiting for you. The growing crowd beneath them cheered, as Naruto raised a hand in greeting, and several of the more youthful teens started to chant. Naruto! 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 By the time they had come down from the hill, it had grown from a small whisper into a loud roar, and the bashful hero found himself shaking hands and answering questions with people he didn't even know. Thanks. No, it was no trouble at all. You're welcome. This felt better. Here he did not have to endure any anxiety, stress, or pain like he did in Konoha. Naruto knew could not stay here long, but for a moment he felt at home and at peace. Naruto gave off a low whistle, as he peered into the distance, and saw the extent of the large crowd, which seemed to stretch on without end. He felt Inari grab his wrist, and drag him through the crowd, leading after Tazuna, who also had to struggle to get through. Damn, what a turnout! Muttered the missing nin, still odd that this many people would go out of their way just to see him. Inari nodded as the crowd thickened, then thinned. What did you expect, Naruto-Nisan? You're a hero here. Naruto was about to reply when he suddenly frowned and looked off towards the forest about a mile away. In the forest, a man sighed as he swept a strand of black hair away from his face, while he spied Naruto through a telescope in the crowd below. Heaving a weary sigh, he signaled his two companions to hold their position. They needed to get at Naruto when he was alone to spare any innocent civilians harm in case things went bad. So they would bide their time and wait, but one thing was for certain, as a thought went through the young man's mind. Well, we've found him. I almost wish we hadn't. Damn, I have a nagging feeling that this is going to be troublesome. Tazuna and Inari were giving Naruto a tour of the town, as a crowd of people followed closely behind them. The trio walked at a leisurely pace, with Naruto taking in the surrounding area with awe. Stores, hotels, and restaurants littered the main street, and every building thrived with the sense of newness. There were people everywhere, eating, talking, walking, and the blonde shinobi realized that the bridge had done more than just bring commerce to this small country. It had also brought life and hope. Even now Naruto was surprised by how much had changed in the past few years. Gone were the dilapidated buildings and starving orphans. Gone was the silent, eerie dreariness that seemed to seep into your bones with every step. In its place was a whole new town, fresh and lively with action, exactly the way it should have been from the beginning if not for Gado's tyranny. It took quite a bit of time to get to Tazuna's house due to the large crowd, but at last they made it, and when Naruto saw the house, Tazuna gave a gracious bow to him and said, "Here we are, my humble abode." Naruto gawked at the size of the bridge builder's home. In no way, shape, or form could the castle that stood before them be called humble. The house was probably bigger than Naruto's whole apartment building, and 20 times nicer. From the outside it looked like a traditional Eastern home, complete with black trimmed sliding doors and windows. Dozens of bushes and plants surrounded the complex, and opening the black cast iron gate fencing in the yard, Tazuna waved for him to enter. "Come on in, no need to be shy. I've already told Tsunami that we might be having guests." Still in shock, the missing nin walked up the long narrow pathway leading to the front door, marveling at this large palace-like home before saying with wonderment, "Whoa, how did you get such a huge place? What happened to your old house?" The man let out a loud sigh, glancing over his shoulder at Naruto, and his tone held just a trace of regret. "To be honest, I'd wanted to stay right where I was. However, after completing the bridge and being voted village chief by the residents, they all insisted that I move into a home fit for my position." The blonde nodded his head, eyes still wandering over the vast property, realizing things had definitely changed since the last time he had been here. "Tsunami, Guess who's here? Tazuna called out, unlocking and sliding open the front door to the mansion. A young, black-haired woman poked her head out from around the corner. Naruto-kun, you really are here. She gasped, obviously surprised by his presence. He blinked a bit, amazed at how she still looked the same, even after these years. Hey Tsunami-chan, it's good to see you too. She gave a courteous bow to him, as did he to her. Please, come in, I'll have some tea ready for you all in a moment. Just as quickly as she had come, the brunette woman disappeared again. Naruto blinked at how fast she had moved. Tazuna noted this and gave a small shrug before commenting. You heard her, this way. Tazuna then led them through the house, as Naruto took the chance to study the interior of the mansion. If it was possible, the inside was even more impressive than the outside. Large, colorful wall scrolls hung from the pristine white surface of the walls, and various pictures of Tazuna and his family sat on the smooth wooden surfaces of the tables. Naruto recognized most of the photos from the old house, but he was surprised to see one of him, Inari, Tsunami, and the rest of Team 7 at the official finishing of the bridge party they'd held the night before their departure. He smiled sadly, as he noticed that he and Sasuke were smirking at the camera with matching grins, arms hanging over each other's shoulders in a rare display of camaraderie. It was hard to believe that they'd fought to the death, not once, but twice, and that he had ended up as the one who left the village, whilst Sasuke had ended up perfectly happy and content there. Ah, such poetic irony. He hated irony. Inari noticed this, and nudged his friend in the side, a worried expression on his face. Naruto-Nisan, are you alright? Naruto blinked twice, then shrugged his shoulders and smiled, as he returned his gaze to the picture. Ah, it's nothing, I was just wondering when this picture was taken. Oh, that, I took it right before you guys left. I could get you a copy if you'd like. The blonde shinobi gave a small sad smile, before somberly saying. That's alright Inari. I don't need any reminders of my past life anymore. The young boy looked at Naruto with confusion before his grandfather's voice called out. Inari, why don't you go help with the preparations for the party outside in the courtyard, while Naruto and I talk for a bit? Oh okay grandpa, Inari hesitantly replied, before looking back to Naruto who nodded his head in appreciation. Satisfied that everything was fine, Inari sprinted away, while Naruto jogged to catch up to Tazuna. The two men walked down the corridor until they reached a large, open porch overlooking the backyard. Tazuna motioned for Naruto to take a seat on the throw pillows surrounding a low table. So, Naruto, what brings you back to the wave country? The bridge builder asked, plopping down on the pillow at the head of the table. Naruto gave a small sigh. As you said before, I've left the Leaf Village. Tazuna nodded sagely, as he took a swig from a nearby sake cup. Yep, but I would like to know exactly why you left. If you're worried that I'm some sort of criminal on the run, I can assure I'm not. I left the Leaf Village because things have changed for me over the years Tazuna-san, and the changes in my life weren't as prosperous or beneficial as they have been for you. I really don't want to go into details about why I left. You just have to trust me when I say that staying there brought me no joy anymore, only pain these past few years. I just don't want to hurt anymore Tazuna-san, that's all, can you understand that? Naruto said in a choked and stammering voice. I can understand that Naruto, and I trust you. Why don't you stay here in the wave? Everyone would love for you to call our land your new home. In fact you could stay here, we've got plenty of room and it would make Tsunami and Inari very happy if you did. As Tazuna was making his offer to Naruto, he heard Inari shouting some unintelligible babble into the loudspeaker outside and the crowd cheered in response. I appreciate the offer, you have no idea how much it means to me. As much as I might want to stay here, I can't. Konoha isn't just going to let me walk away. They'll be sending ambush squads out to hunt me down, and it would only be a matter of time before they tracked me here. I won't put all of you or your home in any danger because of me. So, I'll have to be leaving again very soon. You can at least stay for the celebration, can't you? Yes, I can stay for that, but before Inari gets the party started, I need to ask, do you know of any good mask makers in these parts? Tezuna's brow crinkled in thought, as they heard more unintelligible babble from Inari outside. Well, there is this one guy the first know, and he lives on the outskirts of town, but he isn't cheap and rarely comes into town. Then I guess I'll have to go to him and you don't have to worry about expenses. Naruto replied with a grin, as he pulled out a large pouch of coins before adding. I am sorry I won't be able to stay longer, old man. Tazuna gave a small hick at Naruto's apology before smiling and declared. Ah, that's all right, my boy. Just the fact that you have returned to visit us is good enough for this old man. Now let's get the guest of honor to his own party. Hours later, the celebration was in full swing, with nearly the entire populace of the Wave Country present for the bash. Naruto leaned against the wall, quietly drinking a cup of sake, whilst a tall girl with dark hair clad in a traditional white kimono looking to be about 15 was talking to Tazuna, who looked to be getting drunk by the minute. Now, what's with the great Naruto bridge? Surely this Naruto didn't do anything great enough to get a bridge named after him. I'm quite curious about it myself, said another, this one a man, taller than the girl, and in his mid-30s with a clean-shaven face, chiseled features and cold-piercing black eyes. He too wore a kimono, much like that of the girls. Although it seemed that he was ignoring them, Naruto's shinobi instincts were subtly focused on these two strangers, as the girl raised her eyes expectantly at the old man. It wasn't every day that someone got a bridge as huge as that named after them. Tazuna laughed loudly, mouth opening wide in genuine mirth, as he gave a small hick. Well, it's not his physical strength that really affected our town. If that was the case, we'd have named it the Great Kakashi Bridge. That was his sensei's name. Instead, it was what he did for our country emotionally that made a difference. The girl tilted her head, glancing at the man in disbelief. Emotionally? What the hell's that supposed to mean, you old? The man placed a hand on her shoulder and shot her a disapproving glare, as he gave it a squeeze. Suki, that is quite enough. Giving a small bow to Tazuna, he apologized. Gomenasai Tazuna-san, please continue. Tazuna was more than happy to do so, as he took another swing from the bottle he held in his hand. Well, in a way, he united us all and gave us the strength to fight against Gato and his financial oppression. It wasn't until Naruto arrived that our town was able to flourish, and as such, the villagers and I found it fitting to name it after him. After all, the bridge is uniting us with the rest of the shinobi world. Tazuna paused as if remembering something, before turning to the navy-haired girl, who was now looking at Naruto. But what brings you two strangers here? The girl blinked, but the man shrugged slightly, her frown deepening by a minuscule amount. We are merely simple travelers passing through your fine homeland, but may I ask, do you know where we could find this Naruto you speak with such reverence about? Now Naruto was intrigued, and detaching himself from the wall, he stalked over to the man, making himself known to the two strangers. That would be me, what about it? The old man's smirk widened, and a mischievous glint appeared in his eyes. Naruto, do you know these two? The blonde shook his head. I do not. Perhaps they would introduce themselves. As he said introduce, he reached behind his back for the hilt of his blade, making the unspoken threat quite obvious. The man saw it as well, and bowed deeply, the girl following suit, albeit a bit reluctantly, a second later. Ah, so you are Naruto Uzumaki? No. Naruto gave a firm nod. You already know this. But what business do you have with me? He now raised himself up, and the girl mimicked him, giving the man beside her a glare for making her bow, but she was silent as he spoke. Do you remember Princess Kazuhana Koyuki? Naruto blinked in surprise at the mention of the name, and of course Tazuna took it the wrong way. I see Naruto's moved on from Sakura-chan. I'm glad you're seeing someone else and a princess to boot, good choice. The Junin missing nin gawked at the old man in bewilderment as he thought. What the hell was he trying to imply? Tazuna cackled wildly at the look of confusion on Naruto's face before saying jovially. Just kidding, my boy. Luckily for Tazuna, before Naruto could rake him over the coals, Tsunami chose that moment to walk into the room with their drinks. Oh, did I miss something? She asked, setting the tray down on the large table before taking a place next to Naruto. No. Naruto grumbled in irritation at not being able to reprimand her father for his teasing insinuations in regard to him and Princess Koyuki. Finally, the man decided to introduce himself. I am Asaki, and this is my niece, Suki. We bring you word from Princess Koyuki. Asaki then pulled out a white envelope from the large folds of his sleeve, and handed it to Naruto, who promptly opened it, as he recognized the seal of the leader of Spring Country. We are here on her behalf, as Princess Koyuki asked us to seek out the hero who saved her in the past and urgently requests his presence in our land once more. He gave a small nod as he read over the letter, and looked at the pictures attached to it. Naruto, if you are reading this, then Asaki and Suki have succeeded in finding you. I'm sure you are wondering why you have been given this. Naruto now looked at the pictures, and let in a sharp intake of breath, as he looked over the pictures that depicted fires, and terrible blizzards ravaging the Spring Country. And in one of those pictures he saw an all too familiar face. Even though the face was heavily scarred, he recognized it immediately, his eyes narrowing at the sight of a man brutally slaughtering a villager. Dotu. Now he returned to reading the letter with earnest, as he thought with alarm. Oh Kami, how did he live? Dotu is alive. He has been wreaking havoc upon our lands and we have tried all methods to rid ourselves of him. But all the other villages that we requested aid from have turned us down. Naturally, we asked the Leaf for aid, but the team they sent was never seen after they pursued my uncle. All those were sent out against Dotu either came back in a coffin or were never seen again. Sasuke visited recently in search of you and it was then that I learned you had left the Leaf Village. I don't know why you've left the Leaf Village, but if you did, I am sure you had a good reason. I took a chance that you might have gone to the Wave Country, remembering you telling me about your first mission as a Leaf Shinobi when we both were imprisoned by Dotu years ago, before you rescued our land. This brings me to my reason for sending Asaki and Suki to you. I ask you this not as an employer, but as a friend. I ask no, I beg of you to come to Spring Country and help free us from Dotu's tyranny. Please Naruto-kun, save my people and our land once more. Give our land hope once again as you did before. Kazuhana Koyuki. Naruto felt rage simmering in his body, but maintained control, as he neatly folded the letter and looked to the two messengers and calmly stated. No. The two Spring representatives were taken aback. What? Suki stammered, whilst Asaki was in a state of shock. Naruto repeated himself and tossed them back the letter, but kept the photos. I said no. Suki looked ready to go at him right then and there, but Asaki held her in check. Naruto-sama, why are you refusing to come to the aid of our princess? I have a boat waiting and we could be back in the Spring Country within a day. Naruto snorted as he turned his back to them, arms crossed over his chest. I refuse. Now be gone, before I do something you might regret. Asaki sighed as he looked to Suki. Very well then, here is the address of a boat we had ready for your use, should you change your mind, Naruto-san. The missing nin took it, but paid them no heed. I won't be needing it. Asaki sadly shook his head, as Suki venomously hissed at the stubborn nin. Is this the great Naruto, the one that our princess always spoke so highly of? I expected someone more kind. You are not him. With that stinging comment, she turned and with Asaki following her stormed out the door, quietly closing it behind her. Naruto rolled his eyes and spat as they left. Irritating girl. Reminds me Sakura, good riddance. Tazuna cast him a drunken glare, whilst a confused Tsunami protested against his gruff and rude response to the messengers. Why did you Naruto held up a hand to silence her question before he showed them the picture again and pointed to the red ring on the man's finger and said, "The reason I refused them is because this Dotu is an imposter. The land of spring may be in danger, but it's the Akatsuki who are lying in wait for me. I'm not yet ready to face them, so it's best for them to think I'm not coming, then to give them a timeline and fall into the trap that is waiting there for me. I will help Princess Koyuki, but when I do I have to be ready for an all-out war when I go there." Hours later, the party had finally wound down, and Naruto knew that he could stay no longer, as the last of the guests bid their goodbyes. "Ah, why do you have to go, Naruto-Nisan?" Inari groaned in complaint, as Naruto ruffled his spiky black hair. "Sorry, Inari, but I've already put your family at too much of a risk." He wrapped the boy in a hug, and then did the same with Tazuna. When he came to Tsunami, he allowed the woman to give him a peck on the cheek before asking, "Will you come back?" He shrugged as he placed his hand on the doorknob. "Perhaps one day I can. Farewell to all of you." Then he was gone, as he walked through the door and into the night. The old man jumped visibly at the sudden appearance of Naruto in his workshop and was about to protest when the clinking sound of a large bag of 100 gold coins hit his table, silencing the mask maker. "Make me a mask," Naruto sternly ordered. The old man nodded as he counted the 100 gold coins and inquired, "Any specifics?" Naruto handed him a design on a piece of parchment and his tone held no question as to what he wanted. "I want it to be unbreakable, and if it can change my voice, that would acceptable also." The mask maker gave a low whistle as he gazed at the design. "This is very intricate and I'll have to use my finest materials to meet your requests on the strength and voice altering capabilities." Naruto was not in the mood for trivial details. "How long?" The sagely old man rubbed his chin as gave his estimate. 12 hours, I would say should do it." Another large bag of 100 gold coins hit his table and Naruto coolly commented, "That's yours if you can do it 6 hours." The old mask maker nodded his head in agreement, as he knew he could produce the mask in that amount of time. He would just have to actually work at a more accelerated rate than the normal leisurely pace he took with his work. Naruto took up a seat in the corner of his shop and leaning back closed eyes, as the sound of the old man working droned on in the background. Nearly 6 hours later the aged mask maker held up the mask, and a smile was set upon his wrinkled features, as he called out, "This is the finest piece of material I've ever crafted. Go ahead lad, put it on." Naruto took the mask and placed it over his face. He was amazed at how smooth it felt, almost as if it was a second skin. When he spoke, his voice sounded like a mix between his and the Kyuubi's. "Perfect. You deserve a tip." Reaching behind his back, he now tossed the man another equally large pouch of money before adding, "I may require your services again later." The mask maker took a puff of his pipe and nodded once, as he eyed the generous sum of money he had been given this night and commented appreciatively, "If you keep paying me like this, then I'll make masks for you and you only. A wise choice and you will tell no one of my presence here, understood?" The wizened mask maker gulped nervously at the underlying tone of what would happen to him should he reveal to anyone that Naruto was here on this evening. However, his fear soon abated when more money was dropped onto the table to emphasize his point. Again the mask maker nodded in understanding. Naruto then turned and walked out into the night, leaving the stunned man to count the generous sum of money he had been given this night. Later on the road, the sun had just risen when Naruto stopped walking, as he felt some familiar chakra signatures. "I knew Ba-chan would send someone, but you, why did she have to send you?" Naruto painfully wondered to himself. Naruto then turned around and the mask was on his face, making his Anbu opponent pause with concern when he saw Naruto's now crystal blue eyes behind it, the whites of his eyes black where they should have been white. Seconds later, he ran through a series of hand seals and Naruto's masked fangs curved upward in a grin, a sad grin as he found himself bound in place, unable to move. Or so the Anbu Junin thought, until Naruto cracked his neck from side to side, and gave a bitter laugh, opening his fangs, and making him a truly fearsome sight indeed. The blonde missing nin then reached behind his back and pulled out his massive blade, holding it with his right hand, while leaving his other hand free to make hand seals, should he need them before remarking. Shadow possession, pitiful, don't you have any better tricks than that, Shikamaru? The Nara gulped apprehensively, as he heard Naruto's mutated voice and saw the scratched leaf headband that was now around his neck. Shaking off his anxiety and mustering up his courage, the Anbu commander ordered with authority. Naruto, you're coming back to the village, don't force us to make you go back. Naruto slowly shook his head, and unexpectedly the Anbu team suddenly found it very hard to breathe, as the air grew thick with Naruto's oppressive chakra pressure. What the hell? This can't be Naruto, all of them thought while struggling to maintain themselves. An icy breeze swept through the air and Shikamaru gulped, as he stared at the menacing mask Naruto now wore upon his face. The fearsome cover bore the look of a bone-like narrow skull with 10 red stripes spread across the top, middle, and bottom left side of his mask. The mouth of the mask appeared as a top and bottom row of elongated teeth. However, the slanted eyes of the mask are what sent a shiver down Shikamaru's back. What had formerly been the white of Naruto's eyes were now obsidian black, while in the center instead of the normal cerulean blue color now were blood red, and staring back at the Nara male who asked with trepidation. Naruto, what have you done? Why do you look like that? The missing nin gave his friend a cold stare, and he stopped spinning his sword before he twisted it to the right and slammed the blade deep into the ground, causing the road they were standing on to shake momentarily from the impact. Naruto then ceased the chakra pressure he was emitting that was rendering the Ino Shika Cho Anbu squad motionless, and answered in a metallic echo of a voice. I haven't done anything, yet. And I won't if you don't force me to, Shikamaru. As for why I look the way I do, I figured I needed an appearance to match how I feel. It's also a warning to everyone that Naruto Uzumaki is no longer to be ed with anymore. We don't want to force you to do anything, Naruto. If you'll just return to the Leaf Village with us, then everything will be less troublesome. We don't want to have to fight you. I'm going to give you and your team a chance to walk away and leave me alone. That's all I want, is to be left alone. If you don't take this chance to leave and try to force me to return to the village, then we will fight. And if that happens, then I cannot guarantee any of you your safety. Shikamaru let out a sigh, but there was a small albeit regretful look on his face that was hiding the worry and concern growing within him, as he somberly stated. You always were troublesome, I suppose, but before we begin our little dance, I'd like to know how you found me so quickly and here of all places. It was troublesome, trying to figure out where you might have gone. The logical choices would have been sooner the Land of Spring or any of the other places you've become a hero in the past few years. However, I know you're smart and would have already figured out those would be the first places Konoha would look. So I took a chance that you would return to the first land you ever became a hero in. No one would ever consider you returning to a land you hadn't seen in over 12 years. Smart, Shikamaru, very smart. I'm not that smart, Naruto, I just got lucky. Don't sell yourself short. After all, you were smart enough to get the girl from me. Shikamaru winced slightly upon hearing this, and Ino's breath hitched in her throat and she felt tears begin to well in her eyes. For his part, Naruto remained impassive, as he watched the reactions of his former comrades. A moment later, Shikamaru pulled out a paper scroll and placed his hands onto it. Naruto's crimson eyes narrowed, as he saw the scroll begin to glow bright white, and he brusquely commented. A sealing scroll, it would seem that you are serious about capturing me. Naruto's words were cold and harsh, but they also held a tinge of regret, and for just a second, one crucial moment in time, the Nara youth hesitated, as he saw the infinite pain and sorrow in the eyes of his friend and asked. Naruto, why did you leave? Naruto instantly took full advantage of his friend's hesitation and felt he had nothing to hold him back after hearing that question. In a blur of black, Naruto disappeared from everyone's sight, and much like Zabuza's voice had done in the past, Naruto's voice echoed all around them as he shouted with fury and determined where to strike them from. Don't ask stupid questions to which you already know the answer, some of you more than others. My soul was already dead there. It just took my mind and body a while to realize the same. I have no place there and no desire to return to the village, ever. Then his voice took on a more malevolent tone, and seconds later his chakra pressure spiked tenfold, rooting the entire Anbu team in place for the second time. In an instant Naruto appeared in front of his friend, crouched down, the air rippling around him from his high speed, and time seemed to slow, as Shikamaru's eyes widened in horror, whilst he watched the masked nin drawing back his blade for a massive swing, and he thought to himself, I guess this is it. Then unexpectedly, Naruto smashed the blunt end of the sword's hilt into the face of his former comrade, but he tempered his blow, controlling the damage so that it was just enough to knock the master strategist out. But it still hurt, and to Shikamaru it felt like a paper bomb had just gone off in his head, as his ear rang from the massive hit, and he just had enough time for one thought before the blackness rushed in to claim him. He wasn't trying to me. Then the Junin fell like a sack of potatoes, hitting the dirt face first with a soft thud. Naruto seemingly watched the whole thing with disinterest, his face still hidden behind his devilish mask. But in reality, he was concerned for the Nara, which he made evident by kneeling down to place 2 fingers on the neck of the unconscious Leaf Junin. He felt a strong and steady pulse. A second later, Shikamaru would live. The Nara heir would have a headache for a day or two, but he would live and come away from this little encounter all the wiser for it. But it still saddened Naruto to hurt his friends, even if in some small way some of them deserved it. He now rose to his feet, and strapped his blade to his back, and he absently commented out loud, He's done. Unfortunately, from a distance Choji misheard what Naruto had said and thought the blonde missing nin had said he's dead. Instantly, the Akamichi heir exploded in a rage at the thought of his best friend being right before his eyes, and screamed with malevolence and vengeance. Naruto, you bastard, all you. Buban Baika no Jutsu. Partial multi-size technique. Naruto gasped in surprise, but he had no time to move, as he felt a pair of hands from Choji's outstretched arms grab him around his throat, choking him. Naruto struggled to pry the vice-like grip away from his throat, but soon found it futile, as the hands squeezed him harder, constricting his airway and making it difficult to breathe. A deep voice thundered into his mind, dripping with disdain, as the Kyuubi no Yuko spoke to his host. Foolish mortal, see what your mercy towards your pathetic comrades has wrought you. You'll die at this rate, if you don't use some of my power. Despite the fact that he was about to black out, Naruto managed a small grin as some blood began to leak out of his mouth. He had long ago accepted the fact that the Kyuubi would be with him until his death, and now the two had formed an uneasy alliance. The demon fox would give Naruto some of his power in exchange for his vessel, allowing him later on to assume some control and satiate the demon's bloodlust ining. The agreement had served Naruto well over the past few years, especially on his Hunter Nin Anbu missions where his targets were wanted dead or alive. It had earned the young man the codename Bloody Kitsune within the Hunter Nin ranks of the Anbu. For if you were a dangerous missing nin and Naruto was assigned to hunt you, he never brought anyone back alive. Damn it, fine, give me some power. Naruto silently spat within his mind. The deep resonating laugh of the Kyuubi echoed in his mind, while he received a huge influx of chakra. Naruto immediately felt the rush of the Kyuubi no Yuko's power course through his body. It almost felt as if he were drowning in a sea of raw chakra, as the glorious rush of adrenaline filled his mind and body. Choji frowned when he saw a red aura begin to leak out from between his tightly clenched fingers, scorching them slightly, as Naruto began to snicker then laugh. Soon, the scorching sensation went from being irritating to all-out burning, and the Akamichi heir was forced to let go, as he felt like his hands would be burned off. Damn it! Choji cried out in distress, as he yanked back his hands and fell to one knee while looking at the palms of his hands, revealing the skin to be slightly singed with burn marks about them. He waved the burning palms up and down, hissing in pain, as the air cooled the seared skin, and he thought to himself, His chakra would have eaten right through my hands if I hadn't let go. Then a deep voice boomed out at him, and the mere sound of it sent shivers down the spine of the muscular nin. Hello, Choji. Now he heard the dark and ominous laughter, and he slowly looked up from where he crouched, and he paled as he saw the masked blazing red eyes of Naruto glaring down at him. It was then Choji heard a crackling sound behind Naruto and noticed that 3 tails of red chakra had bubbled out, as his former friend loomed over him with malice in his eyes and fury in his soul. So, you thought you could strangle the life out of me, old friend. The word friend he added with spiteful emphasis, before he snapped his knee up and rammed it into the face of Choji. A crunching sound the moment the knee hit signified that Naruto had broken the Akamichi heir's nose, causing him to shout in pain, as blood began to leak out. You wanted to me, did you? Naruto blurred away when he saw the incoming punch from Choji, whose left hand passed through nothing but air where the missing nin had been standing mere moments before. The Akamichi blinked, as he thought the obvious distress. Where did he go? The leaf Anbu soon got his answer when he felt an elbow slam into the back of his head, sending a shot of intense pain flaring through his skull. Looking for me? Naruto deviously cackled while he watched his former friend eat dirt before groaning in pain, as his nose was broken further. Get up, old buddy, you still want to me now, don't you? Naruto hissed, but Choji made no move to rise, as he felt too weak to even move. Stand up and fight, Naruto screamed at his fallen comrade lying at his feet, but Choji could only make a feeble attempt to rise. Try as he might, the young Akamichi pushed off the ground as hard as he could, but to no avail. He was just too dazed and couldn't move properly anymore after only 2 Kyuubi-powered hits. Angered, the masked nin began to reach down for Choji again to continue his attack, but a voice from behind stopped him and he looked over his shoulder. Naruto, stop. That's enough, your fight is with me, not them. Naruto saw Ino standing several feet behind him, her hands thrust forward in a familiar pattern. The blonde kunoichi's blue eyes were narrowed and her mouth was set with grim determination, as she spoke with as much courage and authority she could muster. You're coming back to the village, Naruto, whether you want or not. Naruto forgot about Choji and turned his attention to Ino before lifting his head and coldly laughing out loud. Her statement didn't scare him in the least, and he could hear the tinge of hesitation and fear ringing within it. Nor did Naruto fear Ino's family trademark attack of the Shintenshin no Jutsu, mind-body change technique, she was threatening to unleash. Naruto knew with his speed he could easily dodge the slow-moving spirit exchange technique. However, the blonde missing nin decided why bother to dodge the attack if she chose to use it on him, and mockingly said to the girl. Go ahead, Ino, use that technique. Jump into my mind and see what you and the others helped to create up close and personal. The blonde kunoichi stared at Naruto with tears streaming down her face and her arms shaking before they finally fell limp to her sides, and she pleaded in a choked voice. Please, Naruto, don't do this. I'm sorry about what happened. Please just return to the village, I promise. Before Ino could even blink or finish her sentence, Naruto appeared in front of her and grabbing her Junin vest with both hands pulled her up to look directly into his glaring crimson eyes and shouted at her with fury. I would think you of all people would have learned your lesson about promising me anything. Please, Naruto-kun, I know you're angry with me because of what I did, I mean about my decision, but if you give me a chance, I gave you a chance once. I listened to your words and promises just like the other two and took them to heart. And once again I paid the price for my faith and love, but never again, Ino, never again. A moment later a large fist impacted Naruto from behind and sent the blonde Jinchuriki flying into a tree. Ino looked over to see Choji panting heavily and standing shakily with his arm outstretched using his Bubenbaika no Jutsu once again. However, before she could say or do anything, a stinging laughter filled the air before she heard Naruto spat sarcastically. Not very sporting of you, pal, to hit me from behind. So, you want to dance with me some more, Choji? That's fine, you want to me, then go for it. Ino let out a shriek of both pain and fear, as she saw Naruto disappear and then reappear driving a fist into her teammate's gut. Naruto then began running circles around Choji, who was holding his bleeding nose with one hand and wildly lashing out with the other in a futile attempt to hit the speedy Jinchuriki. Naruto was laughing like a madman and seemed to take enjoyment at Choji's pointless attempts to hit him, as he made no effort to attack, for with his speed he did not need to. Shaking her head, the Yamanaka girl immediately ran to the side of Shikamaru, who was still out cold and showed no signs of waking anytime soon, as thought to herself. This is bad, we're one of the top Anbu teams and Naruto still has us totally outclassed here. Choji looked to his left and then his right, trying to get a bearing on the blurred streak of black swirling all around him, moving faster and faster by the second. It was then Naruto mockingly asked, "What's wrong? Can't hit what you can't see." As Ino cradled her boyfriend in her lap, she looked on in dismay, as a red claw of chakra slammed Choji off his feet and into the air. The Akamichi youth blearily opened his eyes, and what he saw sent a chill down his spine. Naruto suddenly appeared above him, his figure outlined against the light of the sun, as he had his left leg raised up high. Then time seemed to slow, as Naruto brought his leg down and delivered a bone-jarring axe kick onto Choji's chest that sent the leaf Junin rocketing down to the earth. The Akamichi fell like a streaking comet and slammed right into the hard and unforgiving earth, kicking up a large cloud of dust that covered him from view. Seconds later, Naruto descended into the dust and another loud thud was heard, followed by an agonizing howl from Choji. Ino was shivering now, as she heard the sounds of a fight in the dust, and by the way Choji was crying out and the laughter from Naruto, the Akamichi heir was losing badly. Naruto was showing no mercy now, and it was as if they were facing an entirely different person than the one they all once knew. Why won't he stop? Ino thought as new tears began to stream from her eyes when she heard a loud crack followed by an agonizing scream for Choji. A moment later, he staggered out of the dust for just a second, holding his right arm limp at his side. The look on his face was one of pure terror, and for a second his eyes met Ino's. "Help!" Choji uttered just that one word, before a claw of red chakra lashed out and pulled him back into the cloud of dirt and debris to continue his beating. Every time he cried out, Ino felt like she was going to die, and still he yelled louder and louder. "Stop! Stop! Stop!" Ino was silently screaming to herself. It soon became too much and she screamed, "Stop it, Naruto!" She shrieked, at the top of her lungs, her anguished cry piercing the air and silencing his laughter. "If you still have any feelings left for me, please stop it." As if on cue, Choji was thrown out of the dust and the bloodied and battered Akamichi skidded to a halt right in front of her, still breathing, but just barely. As the dust finally settled, it revealed Naruto, who had a hand on his mask and in one swift motion removed it, revealing the stern chiseled features of his face. "Take them and leave," Naruto harshly ordered. Naruto-kun, because of you and what we once had, even if it was a lie, I will spare them. Now go before I change my mind." Naruto's voice was full of pain as he spoke, and he slipped his mask back on, his eyes now reverting back to their cerulean blue color, as they stared briefly at Ino while the power of the Kyuubi faded away. "Naruto-kun, please come back with me, I still love." "Don't say it, I've heard that lie said to me 3 times before and I refuse to fall for it ever again. Just leave me alone, Ino, it should be easy enough for you to do. You did it 2 years ago, so just do it again. And tell Ba-chan the same when you get back, just leave me alone, that's all I want, is to be left alone." Naruto somberly stated, before turning on his heels and walking away. As Ino watched his figure slowly disappear down the dirt road, she exhaled a heavy sob and said to herself, "It's not a lie, Naruto-kun, I do still love you, even if you'll never believe me again." As the dawn broke on a new day, Naruto awoke and his hand instantly went to the hilt of his blade when he felt a small weight on his chest. Looking down, he saw a young girl who was resting against him, and the memories of the day before flooded his mind in a torrent of images. Absently, Naruto ran his hand over the cracked skull-like cap that adorned her head over the young girl's green hair. The child in a tender moment yawned, while grabbing Naruto's black t-shirt and snuggled her face into his chest, whilst he wrapped the folds of his black traveling cloak around her. He shook his head ruefully, as it all came back to him and he thought. I never thought I'd end up as a dad when I left the Leaf Village. Flashback. Naruto's journey to get to where he was going was proving not to be as easy of a task as he originally thought it would be. Thanks to the attack by the Inoshika Cho squad a couple of days ago. Instead of taking only 2 days to reach his destination was now going to take 4 days. Naruto was also being further delayed because everywhere he went there were bandits, thieves, and other mercenaries coming out of the woodwork trying to attack and take whatever Naruto might possess on him. However, these rogues constantly attacking him never knew they had made the biggest mistake of their lives in doing so. Naruto actually enjoyed the brief battles with the fools that attacked him. However, they were so weak they proved little challenge if any at all to the blonde Junin, and though that was displeasing, he took great pleasure eyeing the imbeciles, lest they do harm to any innocents in the future. Naruto took what he could from the bodies before incinerating them with a fire jutsu he had liberated along with several other useful jutsu scrolls from the village library, before he took his leave of the leaf. Unfortunately, all Naruto could find amongst the now bloodied bodies he hated were money, a few kunai, and a storage scroll that was empty. Not that it mattered. Naruto felt he could always fill it with anything he wanted given the chance or need to. Now it was quite full with money that he had taken off of several more prosperous bandits that he had first encountered, when he had set out from the wave. However, for now Naruto would use it by storing anything he had hunted, such as a dead rabbit here and there, or yesterday when he had captured a particularly stupid deer in one of his snare traps. Thanks to the storage scroll, the meat would stay fresh and juicy, just waiting to be cooked and eaten. The little girl stirring on his chest broke Naruto out of his musings, and his thoughts turned to the events of the past couple of days. As soon as Naruto walked a distance away from the Inoshika Cho team, he quickly teleported away and upon landing promptly collapsed both physically and mentally. Physically from overexerting himself in his fight against Choji, and mentally at seeing Ino again, as it had been 2 years since she had betrayed his heart after being with him for a year prior. Ino, the final girl of the Trinity, each of whom had taken their turns decimating Naruto's heart. Seeing her again had brought back quite a lot of pain that Naruto had hoped he could keep buried, but never could. Doing his best to rebury his pain, Naruto trudged on, and after many hours of traveling the sun would soon be setting and Naruto decided it was time to rest for the day. Walking off the trail, he heard an argument taking place and sensed several low chakra signatures in a field ahead of him. Upon reaching the clearing, Naruto saw that some bandits had engaged in fight with one another over some sort of dispute, though what exactly he wasn't sure. The way they act like animals, sickening. Naruto thought to himself, while growing both annoyed and tired of their fighting and of one another, as he marched towards them sword in hand. The bickering bandits never stood a chance, and it was over in an instant. He had spared one, as this man's chakra signature was the strongest, and Naruto thought he might be of use to him in the future for what he was planning for the Akatsuki. Naruto's gave the lone bandit a message along with the foreboding warning, and coupled with the fact that he had been wearing his mask when he charged in out of nowhere and had easily slaughtered all of this man's comrades, would ensure that his news was delivered. I want to meet with your boss. I know you're kind and you all follow one man. Tell him that I'm looking for employment. Give him my name, Naruto Uzumaki. If I do not hear from him or you in 3 days, I will personally find you, and make your existence hell on earth. Then, judging by the fearful look in the eyes of the bandit, he had added one last emphasis. And then I'll go after your wife. Needless to say, it had achieved the desired effect, as the tan muscle-bound man had gone as pale as a ghost and stammered. Why, you know about my Ayame? Naruto brought his face close now, his red and black eyes staring into the man's very soul, as his warped voice boomed out at him. Would you care to gamble that I do not know of her? The panicked bandit shook his head rapidly. He did not want to risk the life of his darling wife. Naruto's glare bore into his brown eyes for a second longer, until he pulled away, leaving a small flare in the trembling palms of the man, who instinctively clutched the small metal rod tightly, as if he thought the small device would shelter him. You seem to be a notch above your usual bandit, Naruto proclaimed in a mocking tone of voice. Testing the man to see if he could provoke a fight, he then added, "You actually do have a brain." Anger flashed momentarily through the eyes of the bandit, but he controlled himself and did not make any move of aggression, knowing if he did, this demonic being of a man could him in an instant. It would seem that he wants to live. Good. Naruto thought to himself before he gestured to the flare in the man's hand and warned, "Don't lose that, it may cost you your life if you do. If you have news regarding your leader's response, toss that high into the air. I will see it and then you shall see me again, understand?" The man nodded slowly, as he shakily rose to his feet, afraid of doing something that would result in his death. "Gee, got it," he had sputtered, then took off running like the devil himself was hot on his heels. After Naruto determined that the goon would indeed deliver his message, he had decided to camp here for the night. Seeing as the fire the bandits had started was still roaring, Naruto decided he would rest a bit before looking for a spring or riverbed to wash the blood of his clothes, since if he walked around smelling like blood, he would have to deal with the wild animals that roamed these parts as well. Just as Naruto was sitting down and getting comfortable, he heard off in the distance what sounded like a child's terrified scream. Leaping up to his feet, Naruto focused his chakra to try and sense where the child was. After a moment, he had pinpointed her location, but there wasn't one chakra signature but two. Racing off to find out what was going on, Naruto grumbled to himself, as another distraction was something he did need at that moment. However, he knew that for as much as he had closed his emotions and heart off from people, he was not so far gone that he would let an innocent child be harmed, not if he could prevent it. Racing through the forest at lightning speed, Naruto suddenly came upon a clearing and one of the most peculiar sights he had ever seen. Out in the field ahead of him was a strange thin-looking man with long greasy black hair and two horns, one of which was broken, protruding from his head. The man also bore some type of skull-like mask that nearly covered the entire left side of his face. The strange man also bore a huge crisscross X scar across his chest. However, the most bizarre feature of the man was the fact that he bore 3 stumps instead of arms on the left side of his body and 2 stumps on the right side. The only reason Naruto was able to deduce that the stumps had been arms was due to the fact that the middle arm remained on the right side of the man's body and was holding some type of scythe-like weapon. The blonde Jinchuriki watched with fascination as the emaciated-looking man swung his weapon downwards, as he chased after something. It was then Naruto saw what the man was chasing was a terrified little girl in a simple green gown running for her life. Naruto's eyes narrowed with rage at this, and when he saw the young girl stumble and fall, he disappeared with a yellow flash instantly. "Nell, it's time for you to finally die, you little bitch," Noitra Gilga shouted with glee, as he swung his transformed Zanpakuto in a murderous arc towards the little girl lying on the ground. Clank. The sound of metal hitting metal echoed in Neliel2 Odelschwank's ears, as she had closed her eyes and waited for the blow that would end her life. Tentatively opening her eyes, the little green-haired girl was greeted with a sight that confused her. There, standing between her and Noitra, was a strange man dressed in black with blonde hair and wearing a mask similar to the one atop her own head. This man also held a huge Zanpakuto that was blocking Noitra's scythe blade from descending any further. As the former Espada Rancor No. 5 and the former Leaf Junin glared at one another, both were exerting pressure against the other with their blades. Unable to overpower this blonde stranger, Noitra hissed in anger at the man. "I don't know who you are, but this doesn't concern you, human. Leave now and I will let live." "Humph, brave words, Spider-Man, or should I just call you Stumpy, considering the majority of your arms have already been hacked off? Foolish human. Let me attend to my business with that trembling little bitch behind you, and once I've absorbed her powers, I'll regrow my limbs and show you why you should have left when I offered it to you." Then I'll track down that jingle bell haired wearing freak who did this to me and finish him off as well. I'm afraid I can't do that, Stumpy. I highly doubting a little girl is going get you what you claim. Besides, if that's what it takes for you to gain power, it's probably better that I just finish you off now. Fool, that little girl isn't even human, she's an Arankar as am I, and you have no idea the power we possess when we are at full strength. He's right, Kit, I've heard of these Arankars and I can sense great power in the little girl, but it remains dormant and I don't think she knows how to access it. I'd advise not letting this guy succeed ironing her and gaining that power. Kyuubi's voice echoed a warning in Naruto's brain. I hadn't intended on letting him succeed. Naruto replied out loud. What? Sorry, Stumpy, I was talking to someone else. Anyway, back to you, I don't give a damn if that little girl is a human, an Arankar, or whatever. I'm telling you to walk away, because I won't let you her. So I suggest you take up my offer or suffer the consequences. Neutra's response was to leap back several feet and bring his transformed Zanpakuto up into an attack position before he spat with malevolence and hate. Meddlesome human, I'm going to enjoying you. Yeah, whatever. Tell me something, you say you can regrow your arms, but can you regrow your head? What? That was the last word Neutra was able to say before Naruto disappeared in a yellow flash and appeared in front of the startled Arankar swinging his Zanpakuto and instantly cutting through Neutra's scythe and his neck in one fluid motion. Neliel, who had been watching the entire scene both in fascination and fear, uttered one word in shock, as her former Espada comrade's head rolled off of his body and fell to the ground. Noi, Tra. It was then that Neliel finally succumbed to the stress she had been going through and passed out, much to Naruto's chagrin, as he looked down at her sleeping form and thought to himself. What the hell am I supposed to do now? Quit whining and take her back to your camp, Kit. You and I both know you won't leave her out here by herself. A little while later, back at his camp, Naruto sat down on the ground with his back against a nearby tree. Naruto gazed at Neliel sleeping peacefully on his bedroll. Meanwhile, the Kyuubi no Yuko was praising the boy for his merciless slaughter of Neutra and was proud of the smooth and effortless grace it had been executed. Good work, Kit. You've done this old fox proud. Naruto just heaved a weary sigh, whilst he leaned back against the tree, resting the sore skin of his back against it. It wasn't to please you, damn fox. I just can't stand the thought of anyone preying upon defenseless innocent lives, not while I'm around. Well, if you're so damn noble, Kit, then why are you planning on joining a group of thieves and murderers who do just that? Because I need an army, and one hell of an army at that, if I plan to go to the land of spring and free Koyuki and her people from the Akatsuki. So, I need to find some potential allies, and this Bandit King and the men he leads have heard so much about these past few days sound exactly like what I require to create that army. An interesting and creative plan, it has merit. And with any army going to battle, there should be lots of blood and death, which I enjoy. I wish I could join you on the battlefield were I not sealed up in this blasted body by your father. Naruto chuckled as he threw a nearby twig into the fire, enjoying the sound of the roaring flames and the welcomed heat that it brought to him. You were the one who attacked the Leaf Village. You already know that wasn't my fault, but that damn Madara Uchiha. Naruto nodded silently in agreement and tossed more broken branches into the flames. He then checked his blade for any dents and scratches from his fights of the past few days. Looking at the firelight that reflected off of the impressive weapon, Naruto realized that Zabuza's Zanpakuto was the perfect reminder of the path that he had now chosen to walk. Once he had freed the Spring Country and eliminated the Akatsuki, he would forge his own destiny and go where he pleased, leaving everything else up to fate. A few hours later, Neliel awoke to smell of food being cooked in a pot. Sitting up and wrapping her arms around her legs, she looked around with trepidation and wondered where she was. Are you hungry, little one? Neliel squeaked in surprise at hearing the metallic echo of a voice and looked over to see that same mask-wearing man who had saved her from Neutra stirring a blackened pot over a fire. The little Arankar wasn't sure about this strange man, but for some reason she wasn't afraid of him. As Naruto scooped a healthy portion of whatever he had been cooking onto a plate, he brought it over and placed it in front of Neliel along with a cup of water. Walking back over to the steaming pot, Naruto then dished out a portion of food for himself and sat down across from his newest companion, taking off his mask and revealing his face to her before saying, "Go ahead, little one, eat. I may not be the best cook in the world, but I promise it is edible." Neliel hesitated for a moment and sniffed the food carefully before deciding it was okay, and grabbing a sizable chunk of the food in her cherub little hand stuffed it into her mouth, causing her cheeks to comically puff out. Naruto chuckled at this sight before pointing at his fork and saying, "No need to eat so much in one bite, you can use a fork like I do, little one." "Little one, I can't keep calling you that, what's your name?" The little Arankar in question looked up at the much larger man with curiosity, as to why Naruto asked for her name. In further response to his question, she tilted her slightly to the side, as she studied Naruto's face with scrutiny. Naruto was indeed confused about the young girl's reaction to him. For one thing, she didn't seem afraid of him or his mask, and considering she had witnessed him decapitate someone, that non-reaction was indeed surprising to the blonde Jinchuriki. However, before he could ponder about the little girl any further, Naruto heard a whispery voice, one he had heard once before, the one that had told him to take up Zabuza's blade as his own. It was too soft to understand what the voice was saying, as Naruto strained to recognize them before a voice softly called out, breaking his concentration. "My name is Neliel 2 Odelschwank, but moth people call me Nell 2. Nell 2, that's a pretty name for a pretty girl. My name is Naruto Uzumaki Namikaze, but most people call me Naruto." Neliel blushed at Naruto calling her pretty and stammered, You think I'm pretty, Naruto? I think you're very pretty, Nell-chan, can I call you Nell-chan?" Neliel nodded her head and smiled before Naruto continued on. "Nell-chan, can you tell me where you're from, and do you have any parents or loved ones who are looking for you?" A saddened, forlorn visage spread across Neliel's face, and Naruto could see tears welling in her eyes, as she answered in a choked voice. Nell is from a place called Las Noches, but I don't want to go back, ith not a nice place. Nell doesn't have parent or anyone looking for her. Ichigo, Peshi, Dondochaka, Bawabawa, they're all gone from the Arankar war with the Tool-Tositi. Nell is all alone and hath been for a long time. Naruto could hear the same painful tone in Nell's voice that his own held when he spoke about his own loneliness, and at that moment debated what he should do. Just take the kid as your own and be done with it, you aren't going to leave her alone and you know it. Kyuubi grumbled in annoyance. Groaning to himself upon realizing Kyuubi was probably right, Naruto turned back to look down at the little girl and asked, "You really don't have anyone, Nell-chan?" Neliel only sniffled and kept her head bowed down before softly saying, "Nell has no one anymore. What should I do?" Naruto thought with confusion. Meanwhile, Kyuubi had decided his vessel's musings on the subject were growing quite irritating. So he took it upon himself to flash an image of Neliel sitting in the woods alone at night with several pairs of menacing eyes peering all around her in the dark into Naruto's mind. "That's a damn dirty low blow, you bastard fox!" Naruto shouted angrily within his head. "Says you, Kit." At this point Naruto exhaled a heavy sigh of resignation. The Kyuubi's little picture had done the trick, and Naruto knew he couldn't just leave her here, but then again he wasn't exactly good parent material, but what choice did he have? How can I be a father to someone when I'm a kid myself? Considering what I've been doing lately and what I'm going to be doing, I'm not exactly the ideal father a girl should have. Come on, kid, show some spine. If this kid can handle seeing you lop off the head of someone and isn't freaked out by that mask you wear or the creepy voice it gives you, then I'd say she isn't going to mind what you have planned, just so long as you two are together." Naruto knelt down and cupped Nell's chin so he could look at her and said with sincerity, "Nell-chan, if you don't want to be alone anymore, you can come with me. Would you like that?" Neliel looked up wide-eyed and trembled a bit, as the chance to no longer be alone excited her. She liked this Naruto and wanted to stay with him, but then she remembered Ichigo and the others she had lost and suddenly grew scared at the prospect of losing Naruto. The blonde Jinchuriki noticed this change in Nell's demeanor and in a comforting voice asked, "What's wrong, Nell-chan? Do you not wish to be with me?" "Nell would like to be with you very much, Naruto, but Nell is TCA red. What will happen to Nell if you go away like Ichigo and the others? Nell till misses them, and if you were to go away like them, Nell would be all alone once again. I promise you, Nell-chan, I won't go away like Ichigo and the others. You promise. The promise of a lifetime, Nell, I swear." Nellil smiled brightly before leaping up and hugging Naruto tightly. For the next few minutes, Naruto and his surrogate daughter giggled and played before each of them yawned in perfect unison, both of their mouths opening wide at the exact same moment. Naruto saw this and chuckled a bit, before patting the ground next to him. Come here. End of flashback. And that was how it happened that Naruto had gained a little Arankar girl named Nellil as a daughter. As he looked down at Nell asleep and snuggling up to him in his lap, she looked quite content from what he could determine from her happy face. However, as content as Nell was, Naruto was still worried about the situation he had gotten himself into, as he thought with concern. A daughter must always be protected by her father. Naruto mused, before wondering what on earth he was going to do now. Becoming a father hadn't exactly been part of his plan, and yet here he was, a single father, without any real say in the matter. I don't mind taking care of her, I just don't know how. Naruto thought to himself before letting out a sigh, as he closed his eyes to think, only for them to open again about a minute later when he felt a tug on his shirt. He got a surprising sight as he reopened them. The girl was now amazingly awake and with life-filled eyes looking at him for attention, which Naruto didn't really know how to give since he had no experience whatsoever in being a parent. Are you hungry, Nell-chan? The blonde Jinchuriki asked, before he saw a quick nod from the girl and the sound of two stomachs grumbling that made them both blush in embarrassment. Letting out a laugh, he patted her on the head before lifting her gently off his lap as he stood up and placed her on his left shoulder before handing her a ration bar he had scavenged off a dead bandit. Nell didn't seem to mind as she clapped her tiny hands together several times before eating the meal, not minding the lack taste in her mouth, as these things were pretty bland. She also clearly enjoyed being able to see things at a much higher altitude. She now pumped a tiny fist into the air, and gave a loud declaration all her own, yet very familiar in its own right, as a certain blonde had often shouted it at the top of his lungs. Let's go, Naruto, believe it. Naruto stumbled in surprise, as he heard his own once favorite saying coming from the mouth of this little girl who he had now taken under his wing as her father. But then he calmed himself and shrugged his shoulders in amusement, before gathering his things and with Nell perched on his shoulder, set off towards the road to continue his journey once more. Naruto's new daughter was practically bouncing up and down on his shoulder with unrestrained energy, as they walked. Upon reaching the road, Naruto knelt down and got into a runner's crouch, before giving his daughter a quick glance and saying, "Okay, Nell-chan, let's go. Hopefully we can find some place to eat soon, and with decent food." Naruto then put his mask back on and added, "Hang on tight, we've lost a lot of time and I have to run fast to make up for it, okay?" "Okie dokie. Let's go," Nell eagerly replied, her eyes sparkling with life and energy, as she nodded her head in agreement. She's certainly energetic, Naruto thought with enjoyment before he pushed off the ground with both hands and feet and sped down the road with Nell squealing with joy at going so fast and at such a height. Yay! Naruto skidded to a halt, as he heard a voice seemingly whispering in his mind. His feet dug into the ground and kicked up a large cloud of dust, causing Nell to cough, as he looked to the left and right. Naru-kun, cough, why did we cough, stop? He looked around rapidly, as the dust began to clear. Something was present, but he could not see it, only sense it. Do you feel that? Naruto internally asked his tenant. I feel nothing, you must be paranoid, Kit. Perhaps we should find an inn, so you can rest yourself fully. Naruto shook his head, drawing a confused look from Nell as he did so, while silently declaring, I don't need sleep. I'm wide awake, and someone or something is present with us. I sense no one. Naruto was beginning to grow frustrated, as he could not find this strange presence that seemed to be observing him, and that he alone was aware of. Well, I do. Now shut up so I can concentrate on finding it. The demon lord snorted in contempt before he grumbled his agreement. Very well, I shall be silent for now. Free of any more voices in his head, the rogue nin closed his eyes and stood stone still for a moment. As Naruto concentrated, his adoptive daughter's voice began to fade into the background, as he looked about for anything out of the ordinary, not with his eyes or ears, but with his spirit. Naruto felt something, but it was a ways off and not moving. Was it a threat? He could not be sure. But someone or something was there. Who goes there? The blonde Jinchuriki shouted in his mind. Unfortunately, the only answer he received was nothing. This was growing tiresome, and with a sigh, Naruto reverted himself back into normal vision and opened his eyes to find Nell still perched on his shoulder peering down at him, her hazel-colored eyes filled with both curiosity and concern. Naru-kun, are you okay? Naruto gave a rueful smile, as he reached up to ruffle Nell's green hair, causing her to giggle. I'm fine, Nell too, I was just looking for someone. The little Arankar frowned at Naruto's forlorn look before leaning over and giving him a small kiss on the forehead like any good daughter would do, and asked, Is Naru-kun lonely? Does he need a wife-chan? Naruto nearly stumbled to the ground and blushed at his surrogate daughter's question, as he exclaimed with exasperation. Nell too? I can't just grab a wife-chan out of the blue. Why not? Was little Nell's inquisitive response. Naruto grumbled under his breath, as a tick mark appeared on his head. Already annoyed by not being able to locate that mysterious presence he felt, Naruto accidentally shouted at Nell in a fierce snarl of a voice, as he reached for his mask. Because that's not the way things work. Nell sniffled and tears began to form in her eyes, causing his hand to halt. Nell didn't mean to make Naru-kun angry. He mentally smacked himself across the face. You stupid baka. Stupid. 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 Now look what you did. Desperate not to make her cry, Naruto did the only thing he could possibly think of, as it looked like the invisible dam that held her tears back was about to burst wide open any moment now. So he changed the mood by reaching up to grab her, and in an instant he had gotten her under the arms, causing her sniffles to stop, as she wondered what he was about to do. Naruto gave Nell a wicked grin. As he did so, she stuck out her tongue in response, setting the stage for what he had planned. Come here, you. Naruto cackled, and then he was mercilessly tickling her, causing the little Arankard to squeal with laughter, as she howled with merriment. Naru-kun. That tickles. Exactly. BW ha ha ha. After 2 minutes of the torture, Naruto decided that Nell had enough and stopped his tickle attack, leaving her laughter to slowly fade away, as she gasped for air. Taking a moment to catch his own breath, he wondered what it was that had brought this all about in the first place. Then it hit him, like a boot to the face from Rock Lee. Suddenly, out of nowhere, he got a flashback, or to be more precise, flashbacks. Blurred images and memories, as they roared through his head at warp speed. Memory flashback number 1. I'm sorry, Naruto-kun, I can no longer be with you. What are you talking about, Hinata-chan? My father has put me into an arranged marriage. I will be getting married next week. Ma, married? What do you mean? With who? Hinata finally forced herself to gaze up and see the look of pain etched on Naruto's face. She reached up to touch his cheek and with tears in her eyes softly said, With Kiba-san. Kiba? But you don't love Kiba, you love me. It doesn't matter who I love, Naruto-kun. What do you mean it doesn't matter? Of course it matters. And no, it doesn't, because next week I will be getting married to Kiba and nothing can change that. Of course we can change that, Hinata-chan. We'll go to Ba-chan Tsunade for help, or we can just run away together. But you don't have to get married to Kiba, especially when you don't love him. You don't have to do this. You love me and I love you. Naruto looked down and saw the pained sadness on Hinata's face, before leapt into his arms and he had held her so tight, afraid to let her go, as she wept into his chest and in a choked voice said, I'm sorry, but Lady Tsunade can't do anything and I have to marry Kiba, I have no choice. You do have a choice. Why don't you stand up to father and tell him no? Because I can't. Why? Naruto shouted in frustration with tears rolling down his cheeks, before pushing Hinata away from him. I'm sorry Naru-kun, I can't tell you why. I want to say no to this marriage, but I can't refuse my father on this matter. You mean you won't refuse your father as always? Naruto spat with disgust. Please believe me Naru-kun, I do love you with all of my heart and soul. Hinata exclaimed in desperation. Yeah, you love me, but just not enough to refuse your father or your clan of getting married to someone else. Goodbye Hina-chan, I hope you will have a happy life. Naruto bitterly declared before he turned around and walked away leaving Hinata weeping uncontrollably on the ground. End of flashback number 1. Naruto remembered the feelings of grief that had overwhelmed him, the pain, the loss, so much to bear, too much to remember, as he saw other images flash through his head. Memory flashback number 2. I love you Ino-chan. I'm sorry I wasn't able to say those words to you 6 months ago when you uttered them to me. I was too scared and wrapped up in the pain of what had happened with Hinata. But you asked me to give you a chance and I'm so glad I did. Being with you has saved me from the pain and despair I thought would never go away. I know this seems sudden, but you were right Ino-chan, you are the one that I can love. And I do love you, Ino-chan. Naruto then leaned over and gently placed his soft lips against hers. This was difficult for Ino to resist. She liked how his lips felt when it touched hers, the way it lit a fire in her soul. But she couldn't do this. She couldn't, no matter how much she enjoyed it. Naruto. Ino coughed out in a choked voice while breaking off the kiss. I'm not in love with you anymore. She cried out, tears running down her face. Naruto stood rigid and motionless looking at her, the hurt evident in his voice as he found the words. What do you mean you don't love me anymore? You told me you loved me. Did I do something Ino-chan? Please tell me what it is and I can fix it. You didn't do anything Naruto-kun. I'm sorry, I didn't mean to hurt you Naruto-kun, I still love you as a friend, but it can never be more than that. Why Ino-chan? Please tell me why. I'm in love with someone else. Ino exclaimed, more in an attempt to convince herself rather than the now broken boy standing before her. At that moment Shikamaru stepped out from the shadows of the trees and sheepishly walked over to stand next to the weeping Kunoichi. Naruto glanced back and forth between his friend who couldn't look him in the eye and his now blonde ex-girlfriend before reaching down and placing her hand into the Nara boy's hand. Ino was taken aback when Naruto did this and she looked up and gasped in shock at the visage Naruto now bore upon his face. Ino gazed at Naruto and noticed a brief flicker of pain flash through his eyes, before he dropped the engagement ring onto the ground and was walking away into the night in silence. End of flashback. Then another image flashed across his mind, one of Sakura rushing past him towards Sasuke to attend to his injuries when he had brought the Uchiha back and fulfilled his promise to the girl. What pathetic bullshit. A voice rang out inside his head, but not that of the Kyuubi. This voice was dripping with venom and disdain, as Naruto suddenly found himself standing on a white plain. All around him were images of his time with Sakura, Hinata, and Ino flying everywhere, as if he were caught in the middle of this storm of his past. Who are you? Naruto asked, as more images of his past roared through his head. In response a dark silhouette appeared indistinguishable at the moment, but with a dark, ominous, and deadly aura to it. I never thought sifting through your head would be such a chore. You really are an idiot at times, as your women did a number on you. Naruto frowned as he clenched his hands into fists, all the while receiving images, all of them mistakes that he had made in his past. Whatever you are, why are you making me relive this? An image of him letting Ino go and putting Shikamaru's hand in hers, while walking away without a word. Screaming his fury at Sakura, before he finally snapped and went rogue. Standing outside of the temple at Hinata's wedding, unable to object or stop the proceedings, but wanting so very badly to do so. Catching a fleeting glimpse through the window of Hinata and she of him and how her pale eyes had looked deep into his, the sadness evident within them before she turned her gaze away from his. Grief overcame Naruto, as he placed his hands over his ears, while the voice droned on in his head. I truly am disappointed. The figure then began to take shape and Naruto nearly fell backward in shock, as it was revealed to be that of Momouchi Zabuza himself. But something was different about him. Gone was his usual outfit and harsh attitude. Now, he just seemed disappointed and sad, while as for his outfit it consisted of what appeared to be a black kimono. Are you the one who's been talking to me? Zabuza snorted, and the sneer could be seen through the wrappings he wore over the lower half of his face. Oh look, we have a winner. Why are you doing this to me? Naruto pleadingly asked. Zabuza pointed his free hand at him, one finger jabbing the rogue nin in the chest. I let you take this weapon for your own because I remembered your will of fire from years ago when you battled me in Haku. I thought you would prove to a better master of it than I ever was. But if these little memories of your women playing you for the fool are too much for you to handle, then perhaps I may have overestimated you. Naruto's head snapped up, revealing him glaring furiously at the dead nin, and Zabuza could feel the massive intent directed towards him. The blonde Jinchuriki's voice was laced with hate, sadness, determination, and so much more. I may have made some mistakes with the women I've chosen to love, some really stupid mistakes, but I've put that behind me. Right now, I have a friend who needs my help and I won't be done in by some old rotting corpse of a ninja. The next words of the infamous demon of the mist threw Naruto off balance despite his iron determination. I'm not an old rotting corpse of a ninja, I'm the soul or spirit of that ninja. I only exist within the confines of my Zanpakuto, which you now wield. Because you now hold my blade, I'm able to link up with your mind alone. That's why your furry tenant and no one else in the living world can sense me. Then what do you want of me? What I want is to see my blade reach its full potential in power, and I think you might have what it takes to unlock that true capabilities of my blade. You certainly show more promise in doing that than I ever did when I was alive. A second later, the blade appeared in the hand of Naruto, who spun it about and sheathed it into the strap on his back. Why did you contact me like this, and why the torture session of those memories? Because I can only contact you once before I fade away to another plane of existence. As for the memories you suffered, I needed to know if you would be mentally and emotionally strong enough to handle what is to come. To be honest, I'm still not fully convinced that you are, but I have little choice now. Take this. Zabuza handed him a piece of parchment, the tan paper old and worn with age, and yet somehow, it still miraculously held itself together. Gently unfolding the parchment, Naruto saw it was a series of land markings and paths written out on it. It was a map. Confused, he looked up at Zabuza, who began to fade away, as if beckoned by some unseen cue. Oi, what's with the map? Listen well. Follow that map. It will lead you to an old hideaway of mine. When last I checked, it was still in pretty decent condition. You will meet a man there. Show him that blade and he will let you pass. From there on you will start your journey to unlock the power of your Zanpakuto. A power you will need for your upcoming battles if you wish to save your friend. Zabuza was still fading away, as was the white plane upon which the two of them had stood. He was nearly gone now and he wasn't saying anything else. Futilely, Naruto reached out for him, but his hand passed right through the apparition, as he called out to the fading nin. Hey, I've still got some questions for you. However, Zabuza's spirit had disappeared and his voice echoed after his now out-of-sight body. Those are not for me to answer, farewell. Naruto's eyes snapped open, and he in a ragged breath. Nell was still talking and Naruto realized that what had seemed like minutes in speaking with Zabuza's spirit had only been a few seconds in real time. Naruto also felt something and looking down he saw it was the map that Zabuza had given him in his hand. As the blonde missing nin stared at the piece of paper in his hand, Nell stopped talking when her intensely curious gaze now locked on the scratched headband he wore about his neck. Ooh, what that? Naruto blinked, as he felt a tug on the headband and felt the fabric slip past his neck as it came loose, but he paid no heed to it, as he was still trying to comprehend what had just happened. Only a few seconds passed here, yet it felt like I spent 10 minutes, in whatever that place was. Nell was oblivious to her adoptive father's musings and was fixated on the shiny metal Hittite she held, as she ran her hands over it lovingly like it was a new toy. Wow, teeth is really pretty, can I keep it, Naru-kun? Hearing Nell's question brought Naruto out of his contemplation and staring down at her he soon recovered himself. Smiling as she stared hopefully up at him, Naruto knelt down and placed her back on his shoulder and said, You want to wear my headband? Nell nodded eagerly as she hung it down in front of his face. The little Arankar answered before her face fell, as she realized something. But I don't know how to tie a knot. Naruto gave a small sigh, as he took the headband from her. Hold still. 1 minute later, Nell bore a sparkling smile upon her face, as her new scratched headband was shining brightly from around her throat just as Naruto had worn it. As Naruto ran down the road following the map that he had been given, his surrogate daughter squealed in delight. This is the best, thanks Naru-kun. You're welcome, Naruto mumbled, as he took a left at a nearby river running alongside the fast-moving water. Where did we get the map? Was yet another inquisitively curious query from Nell. From a friend of mine. When are we going to get breakfast? Soon. How long? Oh boy, this is gonna be a long day. Naruto silently thought, as he rolled his eyes. As he ran into the morning light, he grinned with amusement, as his adopted daughter Nell giggled with laughter from the speed he was running and chided him on. Faster, Naru-kun. Faster. Naruto chuckled before some of the Kyuubi no Yuko's red chakra misted about him, lending him more power and speed. Hold on, Nell-chan, this could get a bit rough. The little green-haired Arankar gripped his shoulders tightly, once more her eyes filled with eager excitement and anticipation, as the light glistened off her headband. Yaay, let's go. Then, as if it was even possible, Naruto kicked his speed up yet another notch, rendering him and his new daughter a black and green blur to all that might have seen them. Uchiha Madara frowned as he sat in the throne room of Princess Yukiya Fujika's. It had been well over a week since the Yukiya's vassals had made contact with the Kyuubi no Yuko container in Wave Country according to Zetsu. However, Zetsu further reports that Naruto has yet to show up at the boat to bring him to the land of spring. It would appear that he smelled a trap. Sly little devil, Madara thought to himself. Apparently, that stupid Jinchuriki was no longer the imbecile he once was. For if he had been, then the baka should have come running here as fast as his legs or a boat could take him. Naruto had always been headstrong and should have been easy prey for the remaining members of Akatsuki to capture. Alas, this was not so, and for not the first time in his life the first Uchiha cursed himself for founding that blasted village along with the first Hokage. Apparently somewhere along the way, this stupid Gaki had learned caution and now seemed to be exercising a great deal of it. Looks like this won't be as easy as I thought. Don't think I've forgotten our little game, Uzumaki. You may have gotten smarter since the war, but I will have my revenge, and once I have you in my clutches. A sinister cackle escaped him, as he gazed upon the havoc that he had wreaked throughout the land of spring, which was now covered once more in deadly blizzards, and lethal avalanches. Sooner or later he would have to come. Although the Kyuubi brat may have become wary of a trap, he would not leave a friend in need. You will perish. His ranting was interrupted, as he felt the presence of Zetsu behind him, causing him to pause, and stare out into the snowy night from the lone window before him. Yes, what is it? The plant man hesitated a moment before speaking, both of his halves equally fearful to deliver the news that he was about to speak. Madara cut him off, as he stamped a steel-toed boot into the icy floor of the room, cracking it, and making the base shudder ever so slightly. His back was still turned, but you didn't need to see his face to know that he was not happy. You lost her, didn't you? Zetsu gave a stiff nod, and prepared himself for the worst, as he raised a hand in front of his face, to ward off a potential attack, fearing that his death had come. It never came. Leader Sama, was his nervous query, as he waited for an answer from the radically powerful Uchiha, who was not moving an inch. Tell Suigetsu and Deidara to continue their pursuit of her. Failure will not be tolerated. I want her found. Now. The deadly tone in his voice almost made Zetsu feel sorry for the two Akatsuki members. He gave a grateful bow, then turned to make his exit. Naruto looked at the map and groaning muttered to himself. Go through the abandoned factory. What the hell? Nell seemed more excited and asked. What's a factory? The scene was a gray and dreary one. A dark and abandoned factory set against the backdrop of the morning sun coated in mist. The only sign remaining of a long abandoned village that had stood quietly amongst the forest. It was peaceful despite the dull gray of the former plant, which stood out now amongst nature. However, that tranquil peace was soon shattered, as a section of the third floor was burst open, leaving a massive hole, from which a streak of gray and yellow leapt. The figure hit the ground with a loud thud, and the sheer force of her all forced her to one knee, as she had now broken something in her left leg. She wore a ragged outfit that was in tatters and her left arm hung loosely at her side, as it had been broken before she had smashed a hole in the wall. Fear was all over her face as she pressed a glowing green hand of chakra to her twisted ankle, calming the swelling, as she looked every which way, panic in her eyes. For just a moment, she dared to hope that she had lost them. She was wrong. Then, as if in slow motion, two figures in Akatsuki cloaks landed behind her, unfazed from their fall, whilst she was out of breath, and badly hurt. The one who held a sword sneered down at her, as she looked over her shoulder at him, fear all over her. Looks like you're outta luck. The other Akatsuki member Deidara smirked, as he reached into his clay pouch. She was running for dear life, but it looks like her time's up, huh? You gave us a lot of trouble back there. Frightened as she was, the woman still found the nerve to spit in the face of her captor, who gave her a disgusted look, as he wiped off the saliva. You little bitch. Deidara spat in anger. Suigetsu frowned at her defiance and unsheathed Samahata. Raising the infamous sharkskin scaled blade in his hand, Suigetsu once again felt grateful that Madara had blessed him with one of the legendary 7 swords of the mist after its original owner Hoshigaki Kisame had been during the Fourth Great Shinobi War. The young dark blonde woman stiffened, as she felt the rough skin of his shark-like blade on her neck. Help, she muttered weakly, but of course no one came. Naruto's ears pricked up. Help. Deidara laughed aloud. Help? Who would want to help a Jinchuriki? As the sword headed towards her in a downward arc, and in a moment of desperation something inside of her snapped. Get away, she screamed. Instantly, a blue aura surrounded her, and from that cloak-like chakra 2 tails burst forth, as her appearance became more feral, whilst the sheer intensity of her energy forced them back and away from her, as she screamed with fury at her 2 pursuers. Leave me alone. But then, much to her horror, the blue chakra cloak flickered out a second later, as exhaustion took its toll and left her gasping for breath and barely able to stand. Looking down at her hands, she felt her brief glimmer of hope fade away along with all feeling in her legs, as her knees buckled. No, she stammered, as her knees hit the ground, and just barely was she able to summon enough strength to catch herself on her hand, let alone try to summon forth the chakra again. She had nothing left. Suigetsu chuckled, as the chakra leaked into the bandages that wrapped his blade. Thanks for the meal. Calmly he strode forward, sword in hand. Now, since you won't behave, I think I need to take an arm. Time seemed to slow, as he raised his blade up and his jagged teeth formed a cruel smile on his face. The flow of time returned, and he swung his sword down. The defeated woman just closed her eyes, and waited for the pain. It never came, as she heard a fierce snarl and then a surprised cry. Fearfully, she opened her eyes and got the shock of her life. There was a tall blonde-haired man standing before her, and he was holding back the blade of Suigetsu with his own impressive sword. An amused grin appeared on his face, while Nell watched in safety from her hiding place in a nearby tree. With his other hand, he reached across to his mask and slowly, deliberately slid it on, indicating that he was in battle mode, as he sarcastically asked in a hollow metallic echo of a voice. "Mind if I join the party, boys?" The young woman was in dull shock, as a shadow clone of her savior helped her to her feet. Someone had heard her after all. Tsunade was horrified as she received the news from Ino and asked with disbelief. "He knocked out Shikamaru and beat up Choji so badly that he's now in a coma." The Yamanaka heiress nodded sadly. It had taken her 3 days to bring her injured teammates back to the Leaf Village. Ino was tired mentally, physically, and emotionally from this ordeal with Naruto. Yes, was all Ino could softly say due to her fatigue. Tsunade shook her head in mute shock before her gaze fell to a picture of Jiraiya and Naruto sitting on her desk, as she commented with sadness. "He's changed these past few years, he's not the Naruto we knew, not anymore. Hokage-sama, I would like to request permission to pursue Naruto. I might be able to." Tsunade slammed her hands down upon the desk, as Ino winced from the explosive interruption. "Absolutely not, you're part of the damn reason why he's like this. You are by no means to go after him. In fact, after what's happened, I should recall Team Guy before they encounter him." A knock was heard at the door, and she turned her wrath upon it. "What is it?" Tsunade roared, as she was in no mood for any pleasantries whatsoever. An anxious Anbu burst through the door, unaware of the current situation. "Lady Hokage Tsunade, we have learned Hinata Inuzuka has gone missing and left the Leaf Village within the past few days. We only learned of this when we caught several Inuzuka clan members attempting to leave the village in pursuit of her." Under Anbu questioning, her husband and the Inuzuka clan heir Kiba Inuzuka believes that she has gone off in pursuit of the missing nin Naruto Uzumaki. For a moment nothing happened, as an eerie pall of silence fell over the Hokage's office before a shout erupted from the buxom blonde Hokage that seemed to echo throughout the Leaf Village. "What?